The discovery. Jace Carter wiped the sweat from his brow as he maneuvered his salvage ship, the Trailblazer, through the debris field. The distress beacon had been faint, almost lost in the cosmic static, but something about its frequency had caught his attention. After 15 years of scrapping derelict vessels, he'd learned to trust his instincts. The ship that materialized before him was unlike anything he'd encountered. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly sheen despite obvious battle damage, and intricate patterns were etched into its surface, patterns that seemed to shift and flow when he wasn't looking directly at them. This wasn't human technology. "Well, this is either going to make me rich or get me killed," Jace muttered, running his weathered hands through his graying hair. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth. The alien vessel's airlock seemed to recognize his approach, cycling open with a soft hiss that spoke of advanced engineering. As Jace stepped aboard, emergency lighting flickered to life along the corridors, illuminating walls covered in symbols that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The ship's interior was a maze of curved passages and chambers, each more elaborate than the last. But it was the silence that unnerved him most. Not the dead silence of a tomb, but the expectant quiet of something waiting. Then he heard it, a soft whimpering that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. Following the sound deeper into the ship, Jace's boots echoed against floors that seemed to pulse with a faint, rhythmic energy. The whimpering grew stronger, more desperate, leading him to a sealed chamber at the ship's heart. When the door finally opened, revealing what lay beyond, Jace's breath caught in his throat. His discovery would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire galaxy. The prisoners. The chamber was bathed in an eerie blue glow, and at its center stood something that made Jace question his sanity. A magnificent feline creature, easily the size of a large dog, was chained to a crystalline pillar. Her fur shimmered with golden highlights, and her eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. But she wasn't alone. 3 smaller forms huddled behind her, cubs with the same golden eyes and shimmering fur. They watched Jace with a mixture of fear and desperate hope that tugged at something deep in his chest. The mother cat's chains weren't crude metal restraints. They were made of the same crystalline material as the pillar, pulsing with energy that seemed to sap her strength. When she tried to move toward her cubs, the chains sparked, sending visible jolts of pain through her body. "Easy there," Jace whispered, raising his hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The creature's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and something remarkable happened. Images flooded Jace's mind, not his own memories, but hers. He saw this ship in its glory days, saw her people, a proud race that had traveled the stars for millennia. He saw the attack, the capture, the long imprisonment. She was trying to communicate with him. Jace approached the crystalline chains carefully, his engineering mind already analyzing their structure. The energy patterns were complex but not incomprehensible. Whoever had built these restraints had been brilliant, but they hadn't accounted for human stubbornness. "I don't know who did this to you," he said, pulling tools from his belt, "but they're not here anymore. And I've never met a lock I couldn't break." As he worked, the cubs crept closer, their mother watching intently. The ship itself seemed to hold its breath, the very air growing thick with anticipation. When the first chain finally shattered, releasing a cascade of dissipating energy, the relief in the mother cat's eyes was overwhelming. But Jace's work was far from over, and he was about to discover that freeing these creatures would awaken something far more powerful than he could have imagined. The awakening. The moment the last chain fell away, everything changed. The mother cat stretched her limbs, power flowing back into her magnificent form. But it wasn't just her freedom that had been restored, the ship itself began to hum with renewed life. Lights that had been dim for centuries blazed to full brightness, and the walls themselves seemed to sing with harmonic frequencies that resonated in Jace's bones. The cubs rushed to their mother, nuzzling against her as she touched each one with tender care. Through their strange mental connection, Jace felt their joy, their relief, and something else, gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes. "We're not safe here," he said, though he wasn't sure if they could understand spoken words. We need to get you out of here before. His warning was cut short by a violent shudder that ran through the ship. On the walls, previously dormant displays flickered to life, showing star maps and tactical readouts in alien script. But Jace didn't need to read the language to understand the flashing red indicators surrounding them. They had company. The mother cat stood, her posture suddenly regal and commanding. She approached one of the displays and placed her paw against it. Instantly, the ship's systems responded, and Jace found himself understanding the readouts as if he'd been born to them. 6 vessels approaching fast. Military configuration. Hostile intent. Those are the ones who imprisoned you, he said, and the cat's golden eyes confirmed his suspicion. But instead of fear, Jace felt something unexpected coursing through the ship, anticipation. This vessel had been waiting, biding its time. The crystalline restraints hadn't just been chains, they'd been a suppression system, keeping the ship dormant. Now it was awake, and it was angry. The mother cat moved to what was clearly a command station, her cubs taking positions that seemed instinctive despite their youth. She looked at Jace and, without words, made her intention clear. They were going to fight. And somehow, incredibly, she wanted him to join them. As the enemy ships closed in, Jace realized he faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could retreat to his salvage ship and flee, or he could trust these alien beings and stand with them against their oppressors. The ship's weapons systems came online with a sound like distant thunder, waiting for his decision. The battle. Jace's hands moved to the controls without conscious thought, the ship's interface adapting to his touch as if it had been waiting for him specifically. The moment he made contact, knowledge flooded his mind, not overwhelming this time, but settling into place like pieces of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve his entire life. I've been fixing broken things all my life, he murmured, feeling the ship's systems harmonize around him. Let's see if I can help you fix this. The enemy vessels opened fire first, their weapons primitive compared to the awakened alien ship's capabilities. Energy beams that should have torn through the hull were absorbed and redirected, turning their own attacks against them. But the mother cat wasn't interested in a prolonged battle. Through their connection, Jace felt her determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring her cubs would never again know the terror of captivity. The ship moved like a living thing, its reactions flowing seamlessly between Jace's tactical thinking and the feline's instinctive grace. They weren't just piloting the vessel, they were dancing with it, 3 minds united in purpose. Within minutes, the enemy fleet was crippled. Not destroyed, the mother cat's mercy extended even to her captors, but left drifting, their weapons and engines disabled. As the last hostile ship fell silent, Jace expected to feel triumph. Instead, he felt something deeper, a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. This ship, these beings, this moment, it all felt like destiny. The mother cat approached him, her cubs following closely. When she touched his hand with her paw, the mental connection deepened, and Jace saw the truth. Her people were scattered across the galaxy, many still imprisoned, others hiding in the shadows of forgotten worlds. She was asking him to help her find them. "You want me to come with you," he said, and her golden eyes confirmed it. "Leave everything behind and venture into the unknown." Jace looked around the ship that had already begun to feel like home, at the cubs who watched him with trust beyond their years, at the mother who had chosen to share her burden with a stranger. His old life, salvaging scraps, living day to day, seemed suddenly small and empty. "Well," he said, settling into what he now realized was meant to be his permanent station, "I always did want to see the galaxy." As they prepared to leave, the ship's true nature continued to reveal itself. This wasn't just a vessel, it was a repository of an entire civilization's knowledge and dreams. The new beginning. Months passed as they traveled the void, and with each jump to a new system, Jace learned more about his extraordinary companions. The mother cat's name, as near as he could translate it, meant, Keeper of Stars, and her cubs were being trained in arts that humanity had never imagined, navigation by stellar harmonics, communication across vast distances through quantum entanglement, and technologies that bridged the gap between science and what humans might call magic. They found others of her kind, sometimes lone survivors hiding on forgotten worlds, sometimes entire communities that had managed to stay hidden. Each rescue strengthened their growing fleet, as other ancient ships awakened to answer the call. But it was during their quiet moments, when the ship drifted between stars, that Jace truly understood what he had become part of. The cubs would curl up near his station while he worked, their purring creating harmonics that helped the ship's systems function more efficiently. The Keeper of Stars would share memories of her people's golden age, when they had been the galaxy's guardians, protecting younger species and nurturing the growth of civilization. "That's what you want to do again, isn't it?" Jace asked during one such session. "Not rule, but protect." Her response came as a feeling rather than words, a deep sense of purpose and responsibility that resonated with something in his own soul. The ship itself had become more than just their vessel. The nanotechnology that comprised its structure had bonded with their collective consciousness, creating something entirely new. It could repair itself, evolve its capabilities, and most remarkably, it had begun to dream. Sometimes Jace would find new chambers that hadn't existed the day before, perfectly designed for purposes that wouldn't become clear until weeks later. The ship wasn't just adapting to their needs, it was anticipating them. On their first anniversary together, as they watched a sunrise on a world they had just liberated, Jace realized that he no longer thought of himself as human traveling with aliens. They were a family, bonded by choice and purpose rather than biology. The Keeper of Stars placed her paw on his shoulder, and through their connection, he felt her gratitude. Not just for freeing her and her cubs, but for choosing to stay, to become part of something larger than himself. In the years that followed, stories would spread across the galaxy, tales of a mysterious ship that appeared wherever tyranny threatened the innocent, of the human who had unlocked an ancient legacy, and of the feline guardians who had returned to guide the stars toward a brighter future. Some called them myths. Others called them legends. But those who saw their ship streak across the night sky knew one thing for certain: hope had returned to the galaxy, and it traveled with a most unlikely crew. As Jace sat at his station, the cubs now grown into magnificent beings in their own right, the Keeper of Stars beside him as they had been since that first day, he smiled. He had spent his life fixing broken things, never realizing that sometimes the broken things could fix you in return. The void stretched before them, no longer empty and unknown, but full of infinite possibilities and the promise of home. The end.